Well, good morning, and Rouser Radio out of Lewis in East Sussex. Once again, what happened yesterday morning with the system isn't happening this morning, and why I have no idea. We should be getting some music. Absolutely not. So I have no idea whether you're hearing music this morning or not. And I do apologise. We did exactly what we did yesterday, but of course it behaves differently today. So anyway, let's take the music away in case you can't even hear me. Rouser Radio out of Lewis, East Sussex, live, and it's Friday morning, the 18th of. Is it, or the 19th? I got totally lost in where we are this week. I don't know why I thought yesterday was Wednesday and today it turns out to be Friday. Heaven only knows. Anyway, apart from the mass confusion at this end, let's try and concentrate on some of the mass confusion that's going on around the country. Because the big problem of that I suspected would happen is really in a milder way happening, but some people will not see it as mild. They'll see it as quite dramatic. Some people may even see it as disastrous because the gap or the chasm which I predicted would happen. It's not just me. A lot of people predict it, but nonetheless, I went along with that thinking, and I think that it's right. That a lot of the predictions of a chasm, because of the stalemate that's happening in Parliament, and the scenarios that could happen, such as Corbyn forming a government without an election, or going to an election and Corbyn winning, going to an election and a hung Parliament. Who knows what might happen next amidst the negotiations with Brexit. Whether we approve or not approve of Brexit, it's one of probably the most important things that's happened to this country in decades and decades and decades. So that we should get a hung Parliament or a neutered government at this particular stage is a bit unfortunate. But I don't want to get into the Brexit debate as such, but it would appear that in a speech last night, Boris Johnson has sort of laid claim to be the man to fill the gap. And he's come out with what he sees as a plan to unite the country. I don't want to go over the entire plan, but basically 50% taxes, that all local taxes should be bundled, such as the house tax, the council tax, various other taxes that we pay should be all bundled and the money given locally to spend on local projects. Now, I have a view on that, but basically Boris sees this as a popular ploy, a popular bid to become Prime Minister, and he believes lead the party to a safety and to some sort of resolution on Brexit. I'm not expressing an opinion one way or another. I know people who are very pro-Johnson. I know people who are very against him. Those who actually have met him in quiet circumstances are quite impressed with him. Those that met him when he was a journalist prodding around the EU in Brussels aren't so sure. They think he gets up to all sorts of tricks to get his story. But anyway, Boris has made the pitch. And one of the things that he has really said is he wants to see money spent at a local level. He wants to see devolution across the country. He wants to see the local councils having more money to spend and more things to spend it on. So that's all well and good. But I just wonder what we are going to we're going to see the local council's doing, because I have great doubts about their ability at the moment. If you're going to have that sort of reform, perhaps what we've got to do is have root and branch reform of local councils, how they operate, and most certainly how they report to the public. Anyway, that we can consider that in a minute or two. Let's go and see whether we can find any music, because it's very strange that she doesn't want to play this morning. And this one, I think it's a very unusual one. It's called The Dance of the U-Boat. So just in case you can't hear it, it doesn't matter. So let's give it a try anyway. Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I'm not quite sure whether that's the sort of thing you want to listen to this hour of the morning, but since many of you will listen to it later in the day, I guess it's not too bad. It's music for this program rather than music for early morning. So that's the Dance of the U-Boat, and you can read into that what you will. I suppose listening to it evokes all sorts of thoughts, particularly if you're, as I am, a war baby, and very early on in our lives, U-boats played a remarkable part. Not least of which is they affected our diet. If they stopped the ships coming in with food from abroad, then certainly we had a different diet. But anyway, back to the present and Boris Johnson's speech last night. But in many ways, it will be thrashed around once again, and Brexit will come to the fore again today. Us debating it on this program is not part of what we're all about. What we're really about is trying to look at local issues. But our mantra is we are local, not parochial. So we do look at national and international issues that might affect us in our part of the world, which is really Battle to Brighton. We look after the folks from... And I say look after because we're trying hard to set ourselves up as a watchdog, because the surveys show that the more you lose local media, the higher taxes become, and the less efficient local government becomes. And although our newspapers do the best that they can, they've had great budget cuts. In fact, it was just a couple of months ago, it looked as if one of our newspapers, local newspapers, was under threat because it was part of a chain that looked as if it was going to go bust. We haven't got the resources at Rouse Radio. Of course we haven't. Or at our sister operation, Mirador Television. But what we can do is we can listen to what people are saying in the groups, the Facebook groups, which I find a great source of information, because people like to look at the very, very local issue, the parochial issue, and that actually reflects into what people are thinking, sometimes nationally, but certainly across the region, from Battle to Brighton, up to Tunbridge Wells, and eventually up to Gatwick. So that's a pretty fair old geographic area, and probably about 2 or 3 million people in it. But no town with more than about 100,000, and that's why we say that we're radio and television for tiny towns. Anyway, enough of that. Let's just go back to local issues, because under Boris's new plan, what we will do is we will see a much more money coming to the local councils. Now, that's pretty good, I think, in principle. But in practice, we don't have very good councils. You think we don't have a very good national government? Well, we don't have very good councils either. I mean, Lewis is in complete and utter chaos. The latest East County Council is their approach to looking after us, if you want to put it that way, to governance, is to lower the amount that they have to spend on various things, and they vary between cutting bus passes and affecting library services to making sure that we get dinged more with parking charges and with the business rate, the council tax, if you like, for businesses. And that really does bother me, because surely that's playing into the hands of both the internet companies and the big supermarkets. And here, on the one hand, we've got people saying, save the high street, save the high street. And on the other, a local council or a county council saying, we're going to up the business rate. Well, I don't know. It doesn't seem to me that it's the sort of thing that gels somehow. Doesn't really match, does it? So if we've got that sort of dichotomy, if we've got that sort of people who go against everything that we know in our society to be holding us back and to affecting the way we live, then giving them more money to spend isn't the answer. What we need is a root and branch clear-out of government from top to bottom. And a survey yesterday, a substantial survey, showed that something like 75% of people had lost faith not only in the government, but in all politicians. And they called for better governance all the way around. And they called for reform all the way around. Not just reform of Parliament, not just reform of the House of Lords, not just reform of how we relate to the EU, not just, in fact, reform in the EU itself, but also at local level. And it is needed at local level. At the moment, it just isn't working. You can't even get through on the phone to the local council. So if you can't do that, where do we start? Well, we start, I think, with examining how the councils can be structured better. And indeed, this is a feeling right throughout the country, so we're not any different in this part of the world in being critical of our councils to the rest of the country. these mergers are all very well because somebody in the back room decides if we merge Eastbourne with Lewes, what the heck, what we'll do is we'll save all this money. But at what cost? A society in chaos, services sometimes working, sometimes not, problems with getting through to talk to anybody at the council. I mean, I hope that they just take that damn silly logo off, customer first, because it just doesn't work. A logo, if you're going to use a logo, and if you're going to use a slogan, then it has to reflect what the organisation is all about. And most certainly, customer first is not what Lewes District Council is about. And from what I can gather, talking to the bunch of correspondence that we're slowly putting together across the region, is it's not what most of the other councils are about. And yet, this mad urge to actually get bigger and better, to merge everything, seems to be sweeping the country. There's something like 15 or 20 of these mergers going to take place in the West Country. I saw an article the other day. Nobody is asking people. If in fact Boris is saying, okay, devolution means that the council will have to consult more with us, that they'll have to be more efficient to get their money, they have to restructure, along with his plan for the restructuring of the top level, top echelons, then okay, seems to make sense. But whatever else happens is putting up the business rate tax means that we're going to have less people on the high street. Even some of the big organisations like banks are withdrawing, not only because they can do so much by computer, and that's our fault, we let them, but also because they say we can't afford these rates and have a branch in every tiny little town and so on and so forth. It's, that is, of course, the chief executives walking away with a few million quid in bonuses and so on and so forth. I mean, you take the one bonus on one chief executive and you probably could pay for 50 or so small branches across East Sussex for a year. I mean, it is crazy. And hopefully one of the big divides that's upsetting the country is with reading about top executives walking away with bonuses of millions and millions and millions. And for instance, somebody who works for East Sussex, for Lewes District Council, I don't know about East Sussex, Lewes District Council, is getting about 20 grand a year. And I know a lady who left and had to leave Lewes because her mother was ill, and she went to care for her mother, which is very admirable, but nobody actually patted her on the back and said, well done, you're looking after your dear old mother. She wants to come back, and the only job she can find is a grand a month, 12,000, and she can't actually find a place even to rent for that. You go to the local council and they say, you'll get a very decent place for 80 quid a week. There we go, customer first. I'm terribly sorry. I just have to laugh. I really do. Oh, we've got to feel better than this, haven't we? Why don't we actually play a little bit of music while I recover myself from laughing? And we're going to give these people more authority and more cash. Oh, never mind. Come on. Control yourself. Here we go. Well, there you go. Now, that was called Buddy by Bensound. And Bensound are really a very, very good operation. I think he's probably one man. He is a prolific composer. His stuff is very cheery and, he's got stuff for all seasons, actually. But he's a lifeline to non-profit organizations because he allows them to use his music copyright-free. If you're a commercial operation, which we hope to turn into one day, then he asks for a fee for the use of his music, and quite rightly so, a royalty, if you like. But he also has this mission to support non-profits until they become profitable and help them to get off the ground. I think that was Buddy by Bensound. We play a lot of Bensound music, both here and on television. All he asks is that we give him due credit for the music, and indeed, Bensound, we give you due credit for all the music that we use. And we are very grateful, and we hope that by providing a platform, if you like, for your music to be heard, that it becomes more and more popular, and it does make you or earn you a few bob. So thank you to Bensound for those sort of things. Let's just get back to... I was having hysterics over the local council again, as usual. But one or two more things that I think that we need to look at, and that is the trains. I have my differences with Norman Baker, our former MP, but when it comes to transport, he certainly knows his cookies. And he's written 2 or 3 articles, mostly for specialists like Transport Magazine and so on. But he's certainly outlined the case for what's wrong with our railways, and a very, very sound case. So if you get a chance to actually read any of those either online or in any of these specialist magazines, I think you'll find that is a very, very solid case that he makes for reform on the railways. Why did I bring that up today? Because, first of all, there's no improvement all the way around. I mean, I caught the 8:45 the other morning, which is the first one that you can get a reasonably cheap ticket on. And it always used to be 8 coaches, and not anymore. It's 4. Jam in, chaps. Come on. You just crash in and hope like hell you don't have to stand all the way to Victoria. But there is disruption again this weekend. So if you're thinking of going to London on Saturday or Sunday, be careful. And be careful if you're going to work on Monday, because quite often these things overrun and there is a knock-on effect. So do take it easy. Do be careful if you're going to go to the big apple this weekend. But there is not much that is really very good about the railways. Yes, we get more frequent services than we did when it was an estate. I mean, many a time I used to turn up and miss the train at Victoria by about a minute, and then have to go and sit in the pub. Oh, how dreadful, how dreadful. But I had to sit in the pub for almost an hour before the next train. Now, they were long trains, they were slam doors, and they also had a lovely little buffet on it. And the fact is, you stood all the way back to Lewis or Eastbourne or wherever you were going, but you stood with a gin and tonic in your hand, and you stood with a whole bunch of mates who'd also turned up and missed the train by a minute, and they also had a couple on the station, and it was sort of a jolly affair. And by the time you actually got to Lewis, you forgot that you were standing, you forgot that the trains were awful, you were feeling fairly bon ami, a friend to everybody, because you'd been able to have at least a civilized ride back, if not a comfortable one. Nowadays, you don't get a comfortable one, and you don't get a civilized one. You know, if you want a drink, you've got to buy it before you get on. And then there's the old pop, so people are just simply drinking in their seats. And if you get somebody who likes 6 or 7 beers, believe me, it can be a bit uncomfortable sitting next to them. And I'm a drinker. I'm all for being able to have a drink. And when I say that, I'm not an excessive drinker, and I'm not a smoker. I haven't had a cigarette since 1980. And I was working in Northern Ireland at the height of the Troubles, and believe me, did we smoke. But each day you didn't know quite what was going to happen. And in fact, without getting into Brexit again, but I swore that I will not get involved with friends and so on talking about Brexit, because it rips families apart, rips friendships apart. And somebody from Northern Ireland yesterday simply insisted on trying to drag me into that sort of conversation. And I don't know whether I lost a friend or not, but I refused to get sucked in. But she was saying, don't you remember, Keith, when we had a snooker table in the loft, and that we had, because of what my husband did, is we had armed coppers and the police outside to make sure that we weren't going to get dumped on by some terrorists. Well, I do remember those days, and they were very tense, and indeed, perhaps we drank a bit more than we should, and we smoked a bit more than we should. And she said, if Brexit takes place, that this will return, and that's what the border is all about. Well, I don't buy that argument, but I do understand the concerns that the people in Northern Ireland have about whatever deal is that affects the border and may mean a return to terrorism. The only thing I would say now is that life in Northern Ireland is pretty damn good. The infrastructure, they did something which the people at Docklands couldn't do or didn't do. They built the infrastructure before they built anything around it, and as a consequence, they've got wonderful infrastructure down on the river. Wonderful walks, they've got concert halls, they've got pubs, they've got restaurants, and the younger people don't want to lose that. They don't want to go back to the days that I spent in Belfast, just creeping around, wondering what was around every next corner, that you couldn't get anywhere because your car was stuck in traffic because of a bomb threat or a bomb scare, going to work and being told, get out, because there's a bomb hanging outside. I don't think that it's going to return to that. But then again, there are so many unsureties about everything we do. It is a possibility, I suppose, and has to be taken into account when you start to talk about Brexit. So those are the sort of things that can rip friendships apart. I'm not going to talk to friends and so on about it, but you make up your own mind. You make up your own mind about it. The only thing is, governance from stem to stern, from top to bottom, is in one hell of a mess. And I think that we've got to make sure that we try hard to fix that. And if that's what Boris is saying he's going to do, well, let's take a look at what he has to say. That's it for this morning. Toodle pip, Rouse Radio out to Lewis, Keith Hayes. Bye.